Thanks, Amy, for taking us into that space and to just enjoy maybe a moment of silence and quiet. One of the things that struck me this week as we were preparing for this moment was that very few of us actually even have time anymore to be able to spend time in quiet. And so I hope that that was truly a gift for you this morning. My name is Ron. I'm the pastor here at Vitalpoint Church, and if you're new, I just want to say welcome to you, new to those of you online, and please let us know where you're watching from so that we can connect with you and the team behind the scenes that is serving you online. A few things before we jump into the message today. The content that I have for us as we wrap up today is we have incredible opportunities to become part of what God is doing here at Vitalpoint Church, and the opportunities come in form of serving, and as we move towards, being reopened and in person and all that, relaunching, some of the areas that we're looking for people to serve is specifically within the context of VPC Kids and guest services and that experience that we want people to have when they arrive. So if you're looking to get connected, you can go to the, vitalpointchurch.com and just fill out the information there. That would be fantastic. Also, we're really excited about what's happening in a few weeks. At the end of September, we're relaunching and launching Connect groups. And these are the groups of people that gather together during the course of the week. Some of them are in person, some of them are online. And what we do in these environments is we begin to learn what does it mean to be the church? What does it mean to do life together? And so we are hoping that you will take advantage of that and become part of a Connect group. What is really exciting about this season is we are launching out of a series that we start next week called Christianity Exposed. And we're going to be looking at the Gospel of Mark. It's a book in the New Testament. We're going to be looking at it, and then in our Connect groups, we're going to be unpacking those things and unfolding them to see how they flow into our lives and out of our lives. And so we're really excited about that, and I hope you take advantage of that. There's groups of all ages and different varieties and so on and so forth, and we even have some young adult groups that are emerging. You can go to the website and figure all that out. I often think I should just come up and just say, go to the website, everything's there, it should be fine. So it's easier just to say those things. So today, I am wrapping up the Vitality series. And one of the reasons why we felt so strongly leading into the fall season to do this Vitality series is to give clarity to maybe those of you that are new and been maybe tracking with us online and now you're in person, but also for those of us who are a regular part of Vitalpoint Church, where we can remind ourselves of who we are as a church and what makes Vitalpoint Church unique in its expression of who we are. And so what I love about that as I think about a relaunch is we're actually all on the same page. We're all together in this. Doesn't matter if you're brand new or you've been around for 7 years. We together get to move forward into this new thing that God is doing. And the invitation will be there for you to be part of that. So today what I want to do is do a quick recap of mission, vision, and then jump into the cause. So mission, we talked about this a few weeks ago. The mission is something that you don't mess with as a church because it was given to us by Jesus. He's been very clear on this. The mission of the church is to be on point with being a witness. He says this in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, where he says, the Spirit of God will come upon you and you will be my witnesses. And what he describes in this moment to a group of early followers of his who would eventually become the church is that they were to give witness to what they've seen, known, and experienced. So there's a dynamic of flowing out of this that a person who becomes a follower of Jesus will live as a witness. A church will live as a witness to the person of Jesus Christ and the kingdom of heaven. What we talked about on mission is the simplicity of showing up. We sometimes overcomplicate the dynamic of being a witness, and we kind of get really funky in our thinking about it. And so what we talked about was the dynamic of simply showing up. It's being available every day in the arenas of our lives and saying, God, I don't know what you're going to do today. I don't know who you're going to create a conversation with, but I'm available to what you want to do in my life and through my life. And so we talked about that mission. Then we also talked about the vision. The vision is often very unique to the expression of the individual church. So then the vision begins to support the mission, and it holds that up. And so what we talked about last week was the vision of Vitalpoint Church is to be a multi-site church that reaches thousands of people who are exploring and growing in their knowledge and commitment to Jesus Christ and his church. Now, I recognize, thank you for clapping, Amy. I always count on you to be like fired up. It's so great. You think we should put you on the payroll just to be fired up. It's so exciting for me because when I think about the vision of Vital Point Church, I realize that the vision has evolved, that it has gotten clearer and it has gotten stronger. As I have watched over the past 7 years, as the two faith communities emerged together in 2014, until we see ourselves standing and sitting here in this moment or at home watching online, is that God has brought clarity to the vision. And the vision for Vital Point, for whatever reason, God has so chosen to do this with us, is to be a church that expresses itself through multiple locations. So our church is not just one singular expression, it is multiple. And where God has been opening the door is through rural, small town settings. I have no idea why he's done that with us. He's just choosing to do that as we continue to see the multiplication aspect of what he's doing in our church. So like today, I preach here twice, and then tonight I'm preaching live in Exeter at our second location, which is really exciting for us as we relaunched Exeter last week at the Anglican Church downtown. Exeter does have a downtown, just so we're clear. It's a location that we're expressing Vital Point Church from. 2022, we're launching Clinton as a multi-site. We already have a launch team together. They've been praying, and it's been a very exciting journey. So in the fall, from a year from now, we're launching Clinton. We're laying all the groundwork right now. And then we're also praying for what God would do. How do you reach thousands of people in a way that honors God? We don't do it through a singular location. We do it through multiple locations. How do we reach people that are exploring in faith and just trying to find the answers to life and meaning and purpose? How do you grow people in their faith? You do that through multiple expressions in multiple locations. I believe that one of the reasons why God provided this particular facility in Poplar Hill to be our central location, and I really wrestled with it. If you've been around for any length of time, you know that I did not like the building. I did not like the location. I really wrestled with it. And I was like, really, God? You want us to go in a building that only seats 150 people? How are we supposed to reach thousands? And I realized that God is using this for a very specific reason, because rural small towns can identify with a building like this than a multi-million-dollar facility plunked in the middle of a city. So when you think about what God is doing, you recognize that out of this is the flow of this expression of the multi-site movement of what God is doing. And I am convinced that God is going to continue to turn the light up on the good news of Jesus in small towns, because the light is starting to dim quite a bit, and we get to go in and turn it back up, which I'm really super excited about. So when you think about that, thank you. Thank you for following. Thank you for following Amy in the clapping this morning. It was perfect. I love it. I was always putting this together about vision. This verse came to me this week, Proverbs 29. It says, where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. And other translation of that would be, without a vision, people perish. There's this idea that vision keeps us moving in the same direction, in the right direction, so that we don't wander, meander. And there's elements of that God has been doing here. Now, where does the cause come in? What is the dynamic of living our lives for a greater cause? So one of the things that has struck me so clearly as we have been navigating through this series is that we must end our series in a way with a challenge to redirect our lives, our energy, our resources, our gifts, and our talents towards what God is doing. And so when I think about that, I realize that the cause is attaching ourselves to something bigger than ourselves. When I think about a cause, I was reflecting on it this week. Today's the 41st anniversary of the Terry Fox run. And I remember being a little boy in Heartland, New Brunswick. I was 5 feet from Terry Fox. He came and spoke at our school. And I didn't understand, obviously, the significance of it and all that. But one of the things that strikes me is I think about that cause. I looked it up. $850 million has been raised to fight cancer because of a man that decided to run across Canada. And as you know, he didn't make it all the way across. But the cause is still alive. When I think about a cause, I think about a few years ago when we as a church rallied and did laps around a track in a high school in North London to raise money for water to put wells into Malawi, Africa with World Vision. A bunch of us walked this track a number of times to come up with 6 kilometers. Some of us were in wagons. to survive it. I did do a lap in a wagon, just to be clear. I did walk the rest of it, but I did sit in a wagon. Someone pulled me around. It was a lot of fun. We raised about $18,000 for that, which was really exciting for us to be part of. Absolutely. Thank you for clapping for that. Yes. Feeling the vibes from you. This past August, a cause that we were part of was raising awareness and solution to human trafficking with an organization called Ally out of British Columbia. We had 12 cyclists ride over 1,000 kilometers in a day. And our goal was $5,000. We ended up raising over $8,500 for this group of people that did the ride. It was such a great thing. Absolutely, right? So when you look at a cause, you realize that there is something inside of every single one of us that wants to be part of something greater than ourselves. There is something God given to us that says, I want to give my life to something that's going to make a difference, that's going to last, that's going to be eternal. I believe that that is a design that God has given to us. Very few of us want to get to the end of our lives and just have a group of people get together and enjoy triangular-shaped sandwiches, and that's about it, and they say hardly anything about you, right? Like, that's the only time you can have triangular-shaped sandwiches at funerals, right? It's the only time. You got to cut the crusts off. You can't leave them on. You just can't do it. But there's a dynamic to that. Like, when my life comes to an end, I don't want people just to eat the sandwiches. I want people to talk about Ron invested his life in a way that made a difference, that had an impact, that there was elements of giving himself to something greater. Maybe you feel the same way. Maybe there's something deep inside of you that's that pull. Where does my meaning and where does my purpose come from? So I was reflecting on this and thinking about, okay, where do we go? How do we talk about the cause as it connects to mission and vision and draws us in an internal way to make changes in our lives? So I got thinking about God's people in the Old Testament. Give you some background to this. And this is going to go somewhere, so just stay with me. There's this moment where God's people are in slavery. They're in Egypt. They've been there for hundreds of years. And God brings this guy named Moses and a team of people around Moses, and they give leadership to the deliverance of God's people from Egypt. Now, what is interesting about the dynamic of this is that these people wandered for 40 years. Some of you might be familiar with the story. They wandered for 40 years. There was some selfishness in there. There's some little bit of idol worship. There was elements of fear of the people in the promised land and so on and so forth. Now, God's presence was with them. We sang about the presence of God this morning. God's presence was with them in the form of two pillars. This is very interesting. Look at Exodus 13:21. It says, "And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night." So what you have in this moment is the expression of God and the revelation of God through these two pillars. So there's protection, there's peace, there's a presence. He creates a path for them. If you just followed me, there was 4 P's there. It was beautiful. Presence, anyway, forget it. You didn't get it. It's this element of understanding how God worked. Now, what is so beautiful, the desire of God to be with his people, he pulls Moses aside and he says, "Moses, I want you to build a mobile tent system called a tabernacle." And we see this in the expression in Exodus where God has a conversation with him. He says, "Listen, I want my presence to be known in this thing called a tabernacle." And when you look at the word tabernacle, it literally means dwelling place. Dwelling place. I love this. God's desire is to be with his people, and it is expressed through this mobile tent called a tabernacle. See, when you look at the life of the Spirit of God, when you look at the element of the Spirit of God working in the Old Testament, you know that the Spirit of God would come over someone and they'd have a prophetic word, or they would, or God's presence and Spirit would speak through like a burning bush or the pillars or so on until Jesus comes, and then the Spirit of God is available to dwell within us and seal us to be his children. But what we see in this moment is this beautiful picture of God wanting to be with his people. And it's the tabernacle is actually this beautiful picture of Jesus himself. It says that in John chapter 1 where it says that the word became flesh and dwelt among us. It's this beautiful connection of tabernacling, dwelling with us. God reveals himself through the person of Jesus Christ, taking on human form to tabernacle amongst us. Now, there's an element of what we begin to realize and see in the connection point of this is the cause, because God's going to shift a few things here for his people. This is so awesome when it comes to understanding this, is that God desires to be with his people, but then something happens as the expression of the tabernacle and how it's going to come about. I want to read it for you in Exodus 35, verses 4 through 10. This is so brilliant. It says this: Moses said to all the congregation of the people of Israel. So he gathers them together and he casts vision. This is the thing that the Lord has commanded. Take from among you a contribution to the Lord. Whoever is of generous heart, let him bring the Lord's contribution: gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins and goat skins, acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and stones for setting, for the ephod and the breastplate. This moment is so incredible because what God does through Moses is he casts a grander vision to be dwelling in this mobile tent, this tabernacle that was going to be elaborate and beautiful. You can read it for yourself through the following chapters, outflowing out of what I just showed you, is that this thing is going to be absolutely stunning and beautiful and is going to be the place where God dwells, where he would meet with his people, and the expression of who he was would be in this mobile tent. Now, as I was looking at this, and as I connected it to the cause, and I connected it to all the dynamics of what this is about, I realized some important truths that were emerging from this for us. The first thing is this: that the tabernacle, the material and the construction of it, would come from amongst them. Amongst them. See, in order for the presence of God to be known and more fully expressed and experienced, it was God's people would need to step up in this moment in order for this to happen. Moses cast the grand vision of the new thing. Here's this new movement. Here's this thing that God is doing. But in the midst of it, it is the people that would step into the moment to provide the material and the construction of this particular mobile tent called the tabernacle. We must understand something very clearly about this. Is that even though God, who created the universe, and even though God spoke creation into being, looks at us and says, I want you to participate in what I am doing in this world. I want you to join me in the expression of my presence in this world. I don't let that pass by. It would be so easy to look at that and go, that's kind of nice. That's kind of swell. It is so deeply profound when you realize that the God of the universe invites us to be part of what he is doing. Like fast forward it to today. When you think about September 19th, 2021, you begin to realize that God's still doing the same thing. That God's still doing this through what is now called the church. How God brings a group of people together and says, will you partner with me in bringing about my awareness in the world around? Will you be part of what I am doing? There's this letter that this guy Paul wrote in the New Testament called Ephesians, and he talks about it, that we are masterpieces within the context of our relationship with Jesus, and in our relationship with Jesus, the masterpiece is designed to do good works. And so in the good works, it's the fulfillment of the expression of what God is trying to do in and through us. I love that Moses put it in front of the people, this grander vision. It says, you can be part of this. You can be in this with us. Now, you also see in the expression of this in Exodus 35 is this, it comes from this generous heart thing. This is the second piece of it that struck me. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure why generous was in there. Why doesn't it just say, give from your heart? That'd be just simpler. But he adds in the generous heart, the generous piece of it. And then I began to realize, as I was looking at this and studying it through and uncovering some things, I realized this simple truth, that when we discover the word generous from a Hebrew word perspective, the word generosity actually reflects the word righteousness of a God in a relationship with God in a person's life. So the Hebrew word generosity is a reflection of the word generosity. So when you tag that together with what was happening, you begin to realize that the generosity, the generous heart, was flowing out of the goodness of God in their right standing with God by faith, and they were expressing it out of their lives. I want to be clear. Their generosity didn't make them right with God. It was an expression of the rightness with God as it flowed out of them. Okay? Generosity marks a follower of Jesus, a person of faith. We will be transformed into generous beings. The Apostle Paul writes about the heart in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. He says, to this point, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Then he says this, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctant or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. This is beautiful dynamic, and I didn't do deep dive on cheerful, but I'm imagining it means out of a hilarious, joyful, laughing spirit. Please look it up later. I could be completely wrong. But there's that feel of the cheerfulness of the expression. Paints a picture, right? To be the church, to be invited in comes from a generous heart. As I was studying through this, I started thinking about Jesus' words about this in a section which is called the Sermon on the Mount. It's found in the Gospel of Matthew. And Jesus talks about treasure and possessions. But then in the middle of it, he does this really bizarre thing in the middle of the expression of treasures in heaven and on earth. He talks about the eyes. And this was so striking to me. The eyes, he talks about the eyes being full of light or full of darkness. And he actually refers to it as the eyes that are healthy and the eyes that are unhealthy. And what is so incredible about those two words is actually the words for stingy and generous. Stingy and generous. So when you think about someone who's going through life who's stingy, Jesus says their eyes have darkness. There's a darkness about them because they are consumed with the things of this world and they're grasping a hold of their possessions with everything they have, trusting that they will give them only what God can give them. And if you want to look at it from a bigger perspective, they're idols that we hold on to, right? And so the eyes are filled with darkness. But then he talks about the eyes filled with light, or actually the light is the generous spirit in which we hold things with an open hand, which we give more generously from a spirit of generosity with a heart that is filled with a cheerfulness. Moses lays it out to them. He says, listen, whoever wants to, whoever stirred within them, give from a generous heart. I love the dynamic of what is unfolding for us as we begin to learn what it means to position our lives, direct our lives towards the cause of God in this world. Now, there's the third piece of it that I want to kind of lay out on the table for you to kind of maybe give some help for us to understand some of the dynamics and the depth of what is happening here. Notice it says that it was brought to the Lord. It was brought to the Lord. I realized something very important here. They didn't bring their gifts to the tabernacle. They brought it to the Lord. They actually understood in that moment their act of worship was not simply just about singing, which we often in our Western culture kind of look at worship as the only, singing as the only form of worship. It was more of their own bringing of themselves to the Lord. This is critical to understand from a generous heart perspective and the work of what God is doing. Is that there are sometimes we get confused with understanding that and this oftentimes keeps people from church and keeps people, clicking out of YouTube and all that kind of stuff, is because so oftentimes we have a perception that the church is after my money. And it's a lie that often people end up believing. And the truth is, no. The truth is that we believe that there is great freedom through a generous spirit of giving back to God what is His so that we can use the conduit of the church to bring about the presence and the awareness of God. This is an important piece of it. So when Desiree and I, when our offering goes in, for example, we know that we're not giving to Vitalpoint. We're actually living in an expression of generosity to God, expressing through the church. Now, in this whole brought to the Lord thing, truth that I want to keep communicating to you, I got to read some more verses for you. This is so great. Verse 20. Then all the generation of the people of Israel departed from the presence of Moses, and they came, everyone whose heart stirred in him, and everyone whose spirit moved him, and brought the Lord's contribution to be used for the tent of the meeting, and for all its service, and for the holy garments. So they came, both men and women, all who were of willing heart, brought brooches and earrings and signet rings and armlets, all sorts of gold objects. Every man dedicated an offering to the gold to the Lord. Verse 29. All the men and women, the people of Israel, whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that the Lord had commanded by Moses to be done, brought it as a free will offering to the Lord. All right, so we've already established the fact that they brought it to the Lord. Did you catch the word? It's the word brought. I might be splitting hairs here, but just run with me on this. There's a difference between giving and bringing. There's a slight difference in these two things. And I use McDonald's as an example. And I know you didn't see that coming, which is perfect, because now some of you just woke up again. When I'm going through the drive-thru in the summer and I'm ordering my, I had it in the first service. No, I forgot in the first service. Sugar-free vanilla iced coffee. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much for being there for me. Sugar-free vanilla iced coffee, medium, costs $1. It's awesome. When I go through the drive-thru and I get that, sometimes they'll say to me, what? Would you like to give an extra $1 to Ronald McDonald House? And it's that awkward moment, right? You don't want to look like that guy, right? No. Like, it's just so hard, right? So you give that $1 or whatever it is that you want to give. You give it out of obligation. You maybe give it out of guilt. You maybe give it out of, you don't want to be that guy, whatever. When I thought about the word they brought to the Lord, I realized a dynamic of bringing from a different perspective, because when I bring, I'm actually bringing from a position of joy. I'm bringing from a position of love. I'm bringing with intention. I'm bringing with intention. I was talking about this with a friend this week, and I was on the phone with him. I was talking this through with him, and I do that sometimes with talks. I'll call someone and say, I'm working on this angle or this thought or this truth, and they'll either affirm or say I'm off my rocker or whatever. But it was interesting because he said to me, he said, Ron, that's me. I love bringing my offering to church. Now, obviously, the last 18 months it's been very difficult, but there's a piece of it where we understand that even if it's an e-transfer, even if it's automatic giving, there's this element of bringing to God. Bringing the contribution to the Lord. Now, notice something about the phrasing and the wording. They were bringing back to the Lord the thing that was already his. The contribution of the Lord. They were bringing back what was already his. There's a theme that you see in Scripture. It's called the tithe. And if you're new to church, it's a funky word for giving that we talk about a 10% giving back to God. And there's an element of understanding tithing is that in our expression of tithing, it's actually a form of giving back to God what is already his, setting that back to him, which therefore blesses the 90% that is left. There's the first fruits element of here that's happening. So when you think about the dynamic of what we're talking about, and I recognize that we're all at different stages of understanding the Christian faith and understanding church and giving and all that, but they were expressing themselves from a spirit of generosity and the stirring of God in their lives, and they were doing it out of bringing back to God what was already his, so that his work could be accomplished and done. Now, what takes shape after this is jaw-dropping. I want to read it for you. This is awesome. Exodus 36. Trying to get my bifocals to line up. It says this. And Moses called these two guys, I can't pronounce their names, and every craftsman in whose mind the Lord had put skills, everyone whose heart stirred him up to come to do the work. I love that because there's a craftsman element. It wasn't just the materials. God's Spirit stirred within them the ability to build this tabernacle. And they received from Moses all the contributions that the people of Israel had brought for doing the work of the sanctuary. They still kept bringing him free will offerings every morning, so that all the craftsmen who were doing every sort of task on the sanctuary came, each from the task that he was doing, and said to Moses, The people bring much more than enough for doing the work that the Lord has commanded us to do. So Moses gave command, and word was proclaimed through the camp. Let no man or woman do anything more for the contribution for the sanctuary. So people were restrained from bringing their materials they had, which was sufficient to do all the work and more. I read that this week. I'm like Moses that must have been a dream for him, you know? He's getting these updates from the craftsmen. He's getting these updates saying, yeah, Moses, we've got way more than what we know what to do with. Can you please tell people to hold off? Like, that is just mind-blowing. Why? Because deep within themselves, they knew that they wanted to see God's work move forward, that God's presence would be available to them through the tabernacle. I'm going to say something that some of you might feel uncomfortable with, but I'm okay. I'm okay saying it. I believe that the church should be the most resourced cause in this world. And the reason why the church needs to be the most resourced expression in this world is because the church has the greatest message in the world, and his name is Jesus. And for me, when I think about the dynamic of what God wants to do in and through his church, is the realization that each and every one of us have an opportunity to fuel that vision and mission. That each of us have an opportunity to step into the moment and say, isn't it amazing that I get to be part of this, of what God is doing? As I was thinking about the mission and vision, and I was thinking about Moses' moment here where he has to stand and restrain the people, like, hold off, everybody. I started thinking about, wouldn't it be the most amazing thing that if the vision and mission of Vitalpoint Church was resourced so much so that we wouldn't have to do year-end initiatives to launch other locations, that God's provision, the money would be there and available? You scared the life out of me, Josh. What the heck was that? That was a moment, Josh. But wouldn't it be amazing that we get to go into small, rural, small town settings and turn the light of Jesus up to bring brightness to the message of the good news of Jesus? Wouldn't it be amazing if we as a church were able to continue to support organizations that are faith-based that would bring initiatives like water and human trafficking solutions? And wouldn't it be amazing if we were able to step into the moment and provide children to go to faith-based camps that are going to hear the good news of Jesus? What would it look like for us to continue to support families that are struggling in this season, where we can just continue to be that conduit of the goodness of God in this world? Wouldn't it be amazing if we stepped into this moment and said, we're tired of playing it safe, and we just step into this moment and realize that God is calling us to something greater than ourselves? The end of Exodus 40, it says, when the tabernacle was finished, that the glory of God filled it. Filled it. Think about the power of that and the invitation of that. So as I close, I really struggled with how to wrap the series up, and I wrestled through what God, what do you want me to say? And I realized that the image of a swimming pool was in front of me. And like you know, their swimming pools have a shallow end and a deep end. And I find so oftentimes, I feel like the safe place to be is in the shallow end, right? It's you can keep your feet on the ground, you got control, it's comfortable, the floaties are close to you, the pool noodles, the fun is right there. But then there's something else about going into the deep end. There's something powerful about swimming in the deep end. I've got some friends that have pools and they got little kids, and we go over, and I love watching a little kid get the nerve to jump into the deep end. It's like mom and dad told me to stay in the safe zone for so long. Now they're telling me I can swim in the deep end. Do I trust them? Do I believe in them? And you can see the tension, right? But then when they finally do it, they find that the whole pool is open to them. Faith is like this pool, and I believe that God is calling and asking some of us, stirring within some of us, to get out of the shallow end and start swimming in the deep end. That this is a pull and a nudge and a tug inside of you. That God is calling you forth to this moment. I know that there are a number of new families and people that have started tracking with our church over the past 18 months, and we're seeing God refresh and renew and do this new thing. But my hope is that as you become part of Vital Point, that you realize that it's not about taking up a seat on Sunday morning or viewing online, that God is calling us to something greater. And that is to reflect who he is in this world through the church. And when we do, we become kingdom builders. The invitation is there for all of us today. Will you begin to direct your life, your energy, your resources, your strength, your talents towards the cause that God is calling us to? It's a great mission, it's a great vision, and it's a cause that's worth giving our lives to.